Story 1. You ever worked the night shift at a McDonald's? No? Good for you, you lucky bastard. Let me tell you, it's not just flipping burgers for drunks and stoners. It's a goddamn circus. And you're the clown. I've seen shit on this job that'd make your skin crawl, but nothing, and I mean nothing, fucked me up like what happened that night. It was the middle of January, cold as balls outside, and I was stuck pulling another graveyard shift because my prick of a landlord didn't give a shit about my paycheck-to-paycheck sob story. Rent was due, and I wasn't about to get kicked out over $750. So there I was, pushing buttons on the fryer and dreaming about being anywhere else, when the drive-through speaker crackled to life. "Welcome to McDonald's. What the fuck do you want?" I said, not even trying to sound polite. What were they gonna do? Fire me? There was a long pause, just static hissing like a snake. Then this slow, gravelly voice came through. "Yeah. Can I get one black coffee and, one chicken nugget?" I frowned. "What? Did you just say one nugget? Like a single nugget?" "Yeah," the guy said, real calm. "Just one." "Listen, man, we don't sell nuggets one at a time. It's 4, 6, 10. Hell, I'll throw one at you for free if you're that hard up. But you're not ordering one goddamn nugget." Another pause. Then, like it was the most normal thing in the world, he said, "One nugget." "Whatever, dude," I muttered, punching it in just to shut him up. "Pull around." I leaned on the counter, watching the cameras, as this beat-up piece of shit sedan rolled into view. It looked like it had been dragged out of a junkyard, peeling paint, duct tape holding the side mirror on, one headlight flickering like a strobe. I couldn't see the driver's face through the windshield. He pulled up to the window, and when I slid it open, the cold air slapped me in the face. "That'll be 213, I said, holding out my hand. The guy didn't move at first. Then he leaned forward, just enough for me to see his face, scruffy beard, tired eyes, and this weird-ass smile that made my stomach twist. It wasn't a friendly smile, it was, I don't know, like he was laughing at me without making a sound. "You should lock the side door," he said, handing me a crumpled $5 bill. "What?" I asked, caught off guard. "The side door," he repeated. "It's unlocked. Anyone could walk right in." My blood turned to ice. I hadn't touched the side door all night, and there was no way this guy could have seen it from the drive-thru. "You want your coffee or not, man?" I said, shoving the bag at him. He took it without another word, still smiling that creepy fucking smile, and drove off. But instead of leaving the lot, he circled around the building and disappeared from the cameras. I grabbed the box cutter from under the counter. I wasn't about to get stabbed over minimum wage, and headed for the side door. Sure as shit, it was unlocked. I locked it, checked the other doors, and went back to the counter, my heart pounding like a drum. Lisa, my manager, came out of the office a few minutes later, yawning like she'd been napping back there. "Everything okay?" she asked, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. "Yeah, just some asshole in the drive-thru," I said, trying to play it cool. But I couldn't shake this feeling. Like a spider crawling up the back of my neck, I kept glancing at the cameras, waiting for that car to show up again. And it did. Around 3:30 a.m., just when I was starting to think the guy had fucked off for good, the same sedan rolled back into the drive-thru. This time, he didn't stop at the speaker. He just crept forward, slow as hell, and parked right in front of the second window. Didn't honk, didn't say a word, just sat there. I stared at the monitor, my stomach doing flips. "Lisa," I called, my voice shaking. You might want to take a look at this. She came out frowning. What now? I pointed at the screen. It's him, the nugget guy. She leaned in, her eyes narrowing. Did he order something? No, he's just sitting there. Lisa sighed, grabbing her headset. Stay here. I'll deal with it. I watched as she stepped outside, waving at the guy through the window. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but she didn't look happy. After a minute, she came back inside, shaking her head. Dude's drunk off his ass, she said. I told him to leave or I'm calling the cops. What did he say? I asked. Something about keeping the doors locked. Freaking weirdo. The guy finally drove off, but I couldn't relax. I kept checking the cameras. My nerves shot to hell. By the time my shift ended at 6 a.m., I was ready to drop. I stepped outside, lighting a cigarette with shaky hands. The lot was empty, thank God. I started walking to my car, parked in the far corner of the lot. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There were footprints in the frost, leading straight to my car. I froze, staring at them. They were fresh. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I crept closer, clutching the box cutter in my pocket, and peeked through the driver's window. There was someone sitting in the driver's seat. Hey! I shouted, yanking the door open. Get the fuck out of my car. The seat was empty. I blinked, my head spinning. I could have sworn. No, I wasn't losing my mind. I checked the back seat, the trunk, nothing. But the footprints didn't lie. Someone had been there. I drove home with the doors locked, every shadow on the road making my skin crawl. When I got to my apartment, I triple-checked the locks and shoved a chair under the doorknob. Then I sat there in the dark, clutching the box cutter like it was a damn lifeline. My phone buzzed, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. It was a text from an unknown number. You forgot to lock your balcony door. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. My apartment didn't have a fucking balcony. Story 2. Alright, so this shit happened a few months back, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I wasn't even planning on staying at a damn motel. I was supposed to make it all the way to my buddy's place 3 states over. But of course, life's a bitch, and my car decided to overheat in the middle of nowhere. The closest town was one of those places that looked like it peaked in the 80s, and even then, it probably wasn't much to brag about. I pulled into this rundown motel just off the highway. The sun set in. The neon sign was half burnt out, so it just flashed, set in, over and over. Real fucking welcoming. But I was dead tired, and I'd already had the pleasure of watching steam pour out of my engine for a good half hour, so I didn't have much of a choice. The guy at the front desk looked like he'd been sitting in that same chair for 20 years. He handed me a key, without so much as a glance, and grunted something that I think was supposed to be room 212. The room smelled like mildew and regret. The carpet was a hideous brown-orange pattern that looked like it had survived multiple crimes, and the bedspread was stiff enough to double as body armor. But hey, it had 4 walls and a lock on the door. Barely. I figured I deserved a drink after the day I'd had, so I hit the bar in the lobby. It wasn't much of a bar, just a dingy corner with a couple of mismatched stools and a TV playing static. The bartender was this middle-aged woman with a smoker's rasp and a name tag that said, Sharon. I ordered a whiskey neat, figuring I could knock back 1 or 2 before calling it a night. That's when he walked in. He was tall, probably mid-40s, with one of those faces that you'd forget the second you looked away, Average as hell. He sat down a couple of stools away from me and ordered a beer. Long day? He asked, turning toward me. His voice was friendly enough, but there was something about his tone that made me hesitate. I'm not usually the chatty type, but I didn't want to be a dick, so I nodded. Yeah, you could say that. Fucking car broke down. He chuckled like we were old buddies. That'll ruin your plans quick. You headed somewhere important? Just visiting a friend, I said, keeping it vague. Ah, nice. I'm on the road a lot myself. Salesman. He extended a hand. Name's Gary. I shook his hand reluctantly. His grip was firm, maybe a little too firm. Chris. We made some small talk. Weather, shitty cars, that kind of thing. Nothing weird, but I couldn't shake this feeling, like there was something off about him. His eyes lingered on me a little too long, like he was studying me, figuring me out. And his smile, it was too wide, too forced, like he'd practiced it in the mirror. After a couple of drinks, I decided to call it a night. Well, Gary, good chatting with you. I'm beat. Same here, he said, flashing that creepy-ass smile again. Maybe I'll see you around. I mumbled something non-committal and headed back to my room. I locked the door, dead-bolted it, and even propped the shitty chair under the handle for good measure. Maybe I was being paranoid, but something about Gary was gnawing at me. I laid down on the lumpy mattress and tried to get some sleep. That's when the noises started. At first, it was just faint footsteps in the hallway. I told myself it was just other guests, even though I hadn't seen a single other person besides Gary and Sharon. Then came the tapping. It was soft, almost like raindrops, but it was coming from the door. Tap, tap, tap. What the fuck? I muttered, sitting up. I waited, listening, but it stopped. Just my imagination, I told myself. Too much whiskey and a shitty day. I must have dozed off at some point, but I woke up to the sound of my door handle rattling. My heart fucking dropped. Someone was trying to get in. I grabbed the tire iron I'd brought in from my car and crept toward the door. Who's there? I barked, trying to sound tougher than I felt. Silence. I yanked open the door, tire iron raised, but the hallway was empty. Just the flickering fluorescent lights and that goddamn mildew smell. I slammed the door shut and double-checked the locks. My hands were shaking, and I felt like I was going to puke. Maybe it was just some drunk asshole who got the wrong room, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. The rest of the night was a blur of paranoia. Every creak, every groan of the shitty old building set me on edge. I didn't sleep a damn wink. By the time morning rolled around, I was ready to get the fuck out of there. I packed up my shit and went to check out. Sharon was still behind the counter, looking like she hadn't moved all night. "Everything okay?" she asked, eyeing me like she knew the answer. "Fine," I lied. "Just need to hit the road." She nodded and handed me my receipt, without another word. I stepped outside, squinting against the bright sunlight. That's when I saw Gary. He was leaning against his car in the parking lot, sipping a coffee, like he didn't have a care in the world. "Morning, Chris," he called out, grinning like we were best friends. "Morning," I muttered, heading straight for my car. "Safe travels," he said, but there was something in his tone that made me shiver. I got in my car and peeled out of there, like the devil himself was chasing me. But even as I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every car that appeared in my rearview mirror sent my pulse racing. I kept checking, half expecting to see Gary's creepy-ass grin. Eventually, I calmed down, convincing myself that I was overreacting. Just a weird guy at a shitty motel, nothing more. But then I noticed the car behind me, a dark sedan, same make and model as Gary's. It was keeping pace with me, matching every turn, every lane change. My chest tightened, and my hands gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I decided to test it. I took an exit at the last second, veering onto a side road. The sedan followed. "Motherfucker!" I hissed, my heart pounding in my ears. I floored it, weaving through back roads and side streets trying to lose him. But no matter what I did, he stayed right on my tail. Finally, I pulled into a gas station, hoping the public setting would make him back off. The sedan drove past, and I let out a shaky breath. Maybe I'd been wrong. Maybe it wasn't him. I went inside to grab a coffee and calm my nerves. When I came back out, there was a note on my windshield. My hands were trembling as I unfolded it. "See you soon, Gary." I looked around, but there was no sign of him. Just the usual crowd of people pumping gas and going about their day. I felt exposed, like a fucking target. I didn't stop driving until I reached my buddy's place, and even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was out there, watching, waiting for the right moment. I told my buddy what happened, but he just laughed it off. Said I was probably imagining things, but I know what I saw, and every time I close my eyes, I see that note. "See you soon." Fuck. That. Shit. Story 3. They say you never truly know a person, not even yourself. Funny how life can feel like it's all in the bag, perfectly normal, until it's not. My life was good, stable, predictable. Married for 8 years to Lisa, with a 6-year-old boy named Dylan, who could talk your ear off about dinosaurs. I had a job that paid the bills. I worked maintenance at Brookhaven Psychological Hospital. Nothing glamorous, just fixing leaky pipes and replacing light bulbs in a place full of people the world doesn't want to deal with. Every day was the same. I'd kiss Lisa goodbye, drop Dylan at school, and head to Brookhaven. I'd patch holes in the drywall or unstick windows painted shut by decades of neglect. Most of the patients kept to themselves. Few mumbled nonsense, but nothing you couldn't tune out. The staff, they were fine. Overworked, underpaid, the usual. Nothing ever happened that made me think, holy shit, something's off here. Until a few weeks ago. It started small, real subtle. I was in one of the older wings, the one that's been closed off for years. They called it the North Wing, but we all called it the Crypt because it was a fucking time capsule of peeling wallpaper, broken furniture, and God knows what stains on the floors. My supervisor, Mike, told me to check out a busted light fixture in one of the rooms. When I got there, I saw the problem right away. The fixture was dangling by a wire. Easy fix. But the moment I stepped into the room, it hit me. The smell, like mildew and something metallic. Blood, maybe. I ignored it, though. Old buildings always stink. I climbed the ladder, tightened a few screws, and was ready to get the hell out. Then I saw it. Scrawled across the ceiling, in what looked like dried red paint, was a single word. Hello. I'm not a superstitious guy, but it gave me a bad fucking feeling. I called it in to Mike, who showed up, shrugged, and said, "Probably some dumbass kids breaking in." He told me to paint over it. I did. I thought that was the end of it. But shit like that doesn't just stop. The next few days were weird. I started feeling like I was being watched, even when I was alone. I'd catch shadows out of the corner of my eye that disappeared when I turned my head. One time, I swore I heard someone whisper my name when I was working in the basement. Fuck this, I muttered to myself. But I didn't tell anyone. You work in a place like Brookhaven long enough, and you learn to brush off creepy shit. It's just an old building. That's what I kept telling myself. Then came the note. I was cleaning out a supply closet when I found it. A piece of folded paper stuffed in a dusty cardboard box. For you, it said on the outside. I almost laughed, like, who the hell leaves a love note in a closet full of mops? But when I opened it, my stomach dropped. It was my handwriting. Not similar. Not close. Mine. The note read, "You should have left when you had the chance." I stared at it, my hands shaking. My brain raced to find an explanation. Maybe someone copied my handwriting. Maybe I wrote it as a joke and forgot. But I knew, deep down, that wasn't it. My chest tightened, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. I brought it up to Lisa that night. She was sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone while Dylan played with his action figures on the floor. I showed her the note and told her about the other stuff. The writing on the ceiling, the whispers, the shadows. "You've been working too hard," she said, brushing it off. "It's probably just stress." "Stress doesn't make your handwriting show up on random notes," I snapped. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Maybe you're sleepwalking or something," she said. "People do weird shit when they're tired." I dropped it. What else could I do? She didn't get it, and I didn't blame her. It did sound fucking insane. The next day at work, things escalated. I was on my way to the boiler room when I passed one of the patients. His name was Leonard, a quiet guy who usually just sat in the corner of the common room, staring at the wall. But this time he looked right at me. "You can't hide," he said. I froze. "What?" "You can't hide from him," Leonard repeated, his voice flat. "From who?" I asked, but he just turned and shuffled away. I told Mike about it, but he waved it off. Patients say weird shit all the time. Don't read too much into it. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Leonard knew something. Something I didn't. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made me jump. Around 3 a.m., I got up to check the locks. Front door, back door, windows, all of it. When I got to Dylan's room, I peeked in to make sure he was okay. That's when I saw the man. He was standing in the shadows at the far end of the room, his face obscured. My heart stopped. "Hey!" I shouted, flipping the light on. No one was there, just Dylan, snoring softly in his bed. I stood there for what felt like forever, my pulse pounding in my ears. Finally, I closed the door and went back to bed, but I didn't sleep a fucking wink. The next few days were a blur of paranoia and dread. I started noticing things at home, objects out of place, windows I swore I'd locked left open, faint scuff marks on the hardwood floors. Lisa told me I was being ridiculous, but I knew. I fucking knew. Someone had been in our house. At work, it got worse. Leonard's cryptic comments turned into full-blown warnings. "He's watching you," he whispered one day. "He's always watching." I tried to shake it off, but every time I saw Leonard, he'd give me this knowing look, like he was in on some cosmic joke I didn't understand. Then last night, everything came to a head. I was working late, finishing up some repairs in the north wing. The place was deserted, silent, except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. As I packed up my tools, I heard footsteps. "Mike?" I called out. No answer. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I grabbed my wrench and stepped into the hallway. It was empty. "Who's there?" I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. No response. I turned to go back to the supply closet, and that's when I saw it. Another note, taped to the door. "Turn around." Every hair on my body stood on end. I spun around, wrench raised, ready to swing, but the hallway was still empty. Then the lights went out. I froze, my heart racing. The only light came from the faint glow of the emergency exit sign at the end of the hall. I fumbled for my flashlight, my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped it. When I finally turned it on, the beam landed on a figure at the far end of the hallway. It was a man. Tall, thin, wearing a dark coat. His face was obscured, but I could feel his eyes on me. "Who the fuck are you?" I shouted, my voice cracking. He didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there, watching. I took a step forward, and he vanished. 1 second he was there, the next he wasn't. I bolted, dropped my wrench, dropped my flashlight, and ran like my life depended on it. When I reached the parking lot, I didn't stop. I jumped in my car, slammed the door, and tore out of there so fast my tires squealed. Now I'm sitting here in my living room, writing this down, because I don't know what else to do. Lisa's asleep upstairs. Dylan, too. But I can't shake the feeling that someone's watching me. That man, whoever the fuck he is, isn't done with me. And here's the kicker. When I got home, I found another note. It was on my kitchen counter, waiting for me like it belonged there. "See you soon. I don't know what's real anymore. I don't know if I'm losing my mind or if something's coming for me. But if I disappear, if something happens to me, promise me one thing. Don't fucking trust anyone."